I first realised something was badly amiss on Skeldara the moment I unlocked the post office that storm-tossed Monday and found half the village already awake, gossiping in heated knots outside the Harbour View tea room. Skeldara is not the sort of Hebridean island where folk normally queue before dawn, unless the fishing fleet is giving away langoustines or the bakery has produced an experimental cronut. Even from the post office steps, I could feel the buzz of urgency rippling off my neighbours like static. Isla MacLeod! Morag Campbell waved me over with an agitated flap of her scarlet mittens, each patterned in the old Fair Isle style we'd practiced together in the Pearl Divers Knitting Club. Morag, retired headmistress and unofficial chief of police, whenever the actual constable was off island, looked as shaken as I'd ever seen her. I joined the knot of knitters outside the tea room. Morag, Agnes Drummond of the Seaview Hotel, shy primary teacher Fiona Boyd, and newly returned marine biologist Callum Fraser, the club's token male and possessor of the neatest pearl stitch on Skeldara. The only regular missing was Eilidh Bannatyne, the curator of the Island Museum, and within seconds I learned why. The Selkie Tapestry, Morag said, swallowing hard. It's gone. I felt my mouth drop open. The Selkie Tapestry, a 16th century wool and silk marvel the size of a cottage wall, was Skeldara's crown jewel. Woven by local women for the wedding of Lady Saoirse MacLeod, it depicted a Selkie bride shedding her sealskin beneath the standing stones. Tourists crossed 3 ferry changes just to glimpse it in our modest, whitewashed museum. Gone as in misplaced, I managed. Gone as in stolen, Agnes whispered, sometime after closing last night. Agnes poured an illicit splash of drambuie into my tea and brought me up to speed. Eilidh had locked the museum at 5, same as always. The night was wild, horizontal rain and gusts fit to flip a lobster creel, so no one was out except Tam McInnes delivering milk. This morning the cleaning volunteer had found the back window smashed and the tapestry's frame empty. The island constable, Archie Graham, was already calling mainland CID. But why meet outside the tea room? I asked. Shouldn't we let Archie handle it? Fiona hugged herself pale. Archie's ferry is stuck on Mull for servicing, remember? Mainland CID won't arrive till tomorrow. In the meantime... She glanced at Morag. The rumour mills decided Eilidh did it. I almost choked on my fortified tea. Eilidh Bannatyne, with her shy smile and perpetual scent of lavender wool wash, was the gentlest soul I knew. She'd curated the museum for 12 years on barely above minimum wage. The tapestry was her baby. What evidence? I demanded. Only the obvious, Morag said grimly. No sign of forced entry on the door she locked. The alarm was deactivated with her code, and they found a scrap of heather-dyed yarn stuck on the empty frame, Fiona finished, voice wobbling. Same batch we used for the charity shawl last month. Eilidh took the leftovers home. We stood silent, snowed under by the implication. The Pearl Divers prided ourselves on 3 things: perfect tension, perfect shortbread, and perfect loyalty. One of our own suspected of art theft cut deeper than a miscrossed cable stitch. Agnes squared her shoulders. Well, ladies, and Callum, whether Archie likes it or not, we shall discover the truth before the CID swoop in and haul Eilidh away. Clear? The club nodded as one. We drained our tea, gathered our waterproofs, and set off into the sting of rain. Our first stop was the museum itself, a former manse crouched behind the kirk. A uniformed mainland officer would tape off the site tomorrow, But for now, only a wilted, closed due to unforeseen circumstances sign barred entry. Morag produced the spare key Eyelid kept under a plant pot, hardly Ocean's 11 security, and we filed in. The empty rectangle on the north wall hit me like a death in the family. Pale plaster showed where sunlight couldn't reach behind the tapestry's centuries-old bulk. A few stray threads fluttered like ghosts. Agnes crossed herself. We examined the smashed window in the tiny staff room. On the sill lay a fist-sized rock, but hardly any glass inside, suggesting the window had been broken outward to fake a break-in. Someone with keys had opened the back door, stolen the tapestry, then smashed the window from inside before leaving. That aligned with the alarm deactivated by Elid's code. Fiona found partial boot prints in the muddy herb border outside. I snapped pictures on my phone, grateful for all those true crime podcasts during endless nights knitting socks. Callum discovered the scrap of yarn, heather purple, Shetland fingering weight, identical to what he and I had used for toe-up socks last month. He sealed it in a sandwich bag. Doesn't prove Eyelid is guilty, he mused. Half the club took home leftovers. Morag gave him a thin smile. Let's see who still possesses theirs. We trekked to Eyelid's cottage on the western cliffs. Its windows glowed, but no smoke rose from the chimney. A note pinned to the door read, "At police station, back later. E." Inside, we could hear Muffin, her elderly terrier, scratching at the floorboards. Fiona's eyes filled. We can't leave Muffin alone all day, poor lad. Agnes tried the latch. Unlocked. We slipped in only to feed the dog and, if I'm honest, peek for clues. It smelled of cedar, lanolin and lavender. Skeins draped every armchair like Technicolor seaweed. Morag located a canvas tote labelled Heather Batch, half the yarn still inside. So the incriminating scrap at the museum didn't necessarily come from here. Look, Fiona pointed to the coffee table. A crumpled letter lay open, header of a London auction house. I smoothed it flat. Dear Miss Bannatyne, further to our phone conversation, we can confirm an insurance valuation of $2.3 million for the item known as the Selkie Tapestry, should it ever come to market. Callum whistled. That's motive material. Or prudence, Agnes countered. Council's renewing the museum insurance next month. Valuation letters, common practice. She lifted a second sheet, an unpaid electricity bill red-tagged final notice. Eyelid had never mentioned money problems, but her curator's wage was slim. Morag sighed. Enough speculation until we speak to her. Next suspect, ourselves. She insisted we all return home, locate our leftover heather yarn, and bring it to the Seaview Hotel Lounge by 7 for comparison. The gale relented by evening, but tension among the pearl divers crackled like static off a nylon sweater. One by one we arrived at the hotel, each bearing a small bundle of purple wool. Morag lined them on a table under a brass lamp. Hers, mine, Agnes's, Fiona's, Callum's. All accounted for, except Elid's, obviously. So who else on the island might own that specific dye lot? At that moment the lounge door banged and in strode Jenny McPherson, the council tourism officer, and occasional guest at our meetings when she wasn't glued to her phone. She approached the bar, ordered a triple gin, and held her free arm oddly stiff at her side, clutching a large tote decorated with cartoon sheep. Morag intercepted her. "Evening, Jenny. Awful business today." Jenny's gaze flicked to us, then away. "Shocking," she said, gulping half her gin. "You must be gutted." She reached for a fireplace poker and began to stir the blaze, over-vigorously. I noticed fine purple fibres clinging to her black blazer. Instinctively, my fingers itched as though holding knitting needles. I edged closer. Lovely tote, I offered. She tightened her grip. Thanks. Gift from my sister. May I see the lining? I've been wanting to sew something similar. Jenny laughed high, fake. Another time, Isla. I'm late for a video call. She bolted towards the stairs, almost knocking over Agnes's prized porcelain cat. We stared after her. Morag's detective senses practically glowed. Follow, but subtly, she breathed. Agnes coughed. Subtlety left the building with that tote bag. But luck favoured us. The ancient lift was out of order, again, so Jenny had to climb the spiral stairs to the first floor function room. We crept behind, shoes muted by threadbare carpet. Halfway up, she paused, swore, and dropped her tote. A heavy rectangle inside thunked alarmingly. She snatched it up and hurried on. Morag's brows shot skyward. Either Jenny's carrying encyclopedias to a Zoom call or... We reached the landing in time to see her unlock the storeroom, slip inside, and slam the door. Morag signalled silence. Callum leaned close. What's through that wall? Unused billiard room, Agnes whispered. Only window faces the sea. Thunder grumbled far off, like the island itself protesting deceit. We retreated downstairs to plot. Plan A. Keep Jenny in sight until the real police arrived. But that meant phoning Constable Archie on Mull and admitting we'd broken half a dozen procedures. Plan B, Morag's choice, involved a diversion worthy of amateur dramatics society. She recruited Agnes's kitchen staff to claim a burst water pipe under the billiard room. Within minutes, pots and pans clanged, staff shouted, and Agnes herself pounded on the storeroom door. Jenny, you in there? We need to evacuate that wing. Risk of electrocution. A muffled squeak, frantic rustling, then the door opened. Jenny emerged, tote still clutched, but face pale. Agnes ushered her towards the stairs, chivying like a border collie, until Jenny joined a knot of curious guests by the bar. Meanwhile, Fiona, Callum and I slipped into the storeroom. Musty linen and abandoned Christmas decorations crowded shelves, but against the far wall rested a wooden chest big enough to hide a body, or a priceless tapestry. Padlock open, evidently dropped in haste. My heart thumped. We lifted the lid. Inside, tightly rolled around a cardboard tube, lay wool and silk glimmering with centuries of skill. The Selkie tapestry. Fiona gasped. She never even wrapped it in acid-free tissue. Callum photographed the evidence. We resealed the chest and rejoined Morag. Confronting a suspected thief while lacking actual authority was not ideal, but Highland ferries were unpredictable in winter. Jenny could vanish with the next one. Morag chose the firelit lounge for ambience, Skeldara justice, part interrogative, part café. Agnes produced drams of whiskey all round, Dutch courage for us, loose-tongue lubricant for Jenny. When everyone was seated, Morag began softly. Jenny, we've recovered the tapestry. It's safe. The tourism officer's glass froze en route to her lips. Recovered? From where? From the chest you unlocked 5 minutes ago. Jenny's shoulders sagged as if someone had dropped a shawl of stones across her back. Tears pricked her eyes. I wasn't stealing it, she whispered. I was protecting it. Even Fiona, eternal believer in the good of humanity, looked unconvinced. Jenny inhaled. The council plans to send the museum's top pieces, tapestry included, on a touring exhibition next year. I found contracts in the chief executive's outbox. They'll be away for 18 months, maybe more. Half the island's tourism income depends on visitors to that tapestry. I argued, but they ignored me. So you removed it preemptively? Morag asked, voice neutral. I meant to keep it hidden until the council meeting next week. Jenny said. Force them to drop the scheme. A stupid plan, I see that now. But after the storm started, I panicked. I thought if something happened to the museum roof, they'd blame me. So I moved it again, here, till I decided what to do. She buried her face in her hands. I never expected Eyelid to be accused. I left evidence pointing to an outsider, the broken window. Agnes's tone was tart as marmalade. Except you left a scrap of our knitting yarn at the scene. Jenny blinked. Yarn? That wasn't me. The room fell silent, flames crackling. Morag folded her arms. Who else had access last night? Jenny chewed her lip. I overheard Councillor McPhee on the phone yesterday, saying a buyer was ready to pounce if the island proved difficult. I assumed he meant the touring show. Perhaps he meant something darker. No time to chase mainland politicians, Morag said. First we clear Eyelid. Jenny, you'll accompany us to the police station and make a full statement. Then we'll talk council corruption. Jenny nodded, resigned. Constable Archie had finally made it back on the late ferry, seasick and surly, but Morag's meticulous notes, Callum's photos, and Jenny's confession sliced through his irritation. He released Eyelid with an apology and a cup of the station's dreadful instant coffee. When our curator returned to her cottage and found Muffins snoring before a freshly lit fire and the pearl divers knitting at her kitchen table, her relief collapsed into tears. Fiona wrapped her in a cashmere throw. Agnes pressed a nip of whiskey into her hand. Eyelid sniffed. You all believed in me. Always, I said, and the rest of the club echoed. Yet not all threads were woven in. Who planted the yarn scrap? The window seemed a ham-fisted attempt to frame an outsider, but the yarn implicated us. If Jenny didn't drop it, who did? Next morning brought answers in the person of Callum Fraser, arriving at the tea room with wind-blown curls and a troubled expression. He asked to speak privately with Morag and me, emerging minutes later, pale but determined. Morag called an emergency pearl divers meeting that evening in the village hall. Every member attended, including a shame-faced Callum and bewildered Eyelid. Muffin snuffled under the chairs. Morag addressed us. Callum wishes to explain how the yarn scrap appeared. He stood, throat working. It was me, I planted it. Gasps rippled. He lifted pleading palms. Not to frame Eyelid, I swear, the opposite. I arrived at the museum last night to give her my completed grant paperwork. I'd used her office printer earlier. I found the tapestry missing, the window smashed, and panicked. I worried the culprit had left no clues. I'd been knitting with that heather yarn while the printer chugged, so without thinking, I stuck a piece on the frame, hoping it would look like amateurs from off-island, tourists who'd bought local wool as souvenirs. He swallowed. I realize how reckless that sounds. Agnes arched an eyebrow. Why not call Archie? I've only just returned to Skeldara after failing in Edinburgh. Didn't want to look foolish again. Morag considered him, then sighed. You'll accompany me to Archie tomorrow to amend your statement. Eyelid surprised us all by crossing the room and hugging Callum. Thank you for believing thieves wouldn't pin it on me, she whispered. He blinked, cheeks turning the colour of raspberry jam. The Selkie tapestry was rehung by the weekend, this time behind reinforced glass and a new alarm coded to multiple staff. Council plans for the touring exhibition were shelved, not least because Jenny threatened to leak their under-the-table negotiations with a shady private gallery. Councillor McPhee resigned for personal reasons 3 days later. Archie issued Callum a formal warning for contaminating evidence, but added that the young scientist's initiative and eye for detail might suit the island's auxiliary constable role. Callum accepted, though he insisted it wouldn't cut into Thursday night knitting. As for the pearl divers, our next meeting overflowed with shortbread, relieved laughter, and projects put on hold during the drama. Morag began a baby blanket for her first grandniece. Agnes tested a lace shawl pattern destined for the hotel gift shop. Fiona stitched hedgehog-patterned wrist warmers for her pupils. I cast on socks in the infamous heather purple. Some might think the colour jinxed, but for me it had come to symbolise loyalty, stubborn, prickly, immune to storms. Eyelid arrived last, carrying a battered notebook. While the CID interrogated me, she said with a shy smile, I drafted a new exhibit proposal, Threads of Courage, Community Craft in the Isles. I hoped you'd advise on live demonstrations? Morag beamed. Only if we're credited as sleuths as well as knitters. Eyelid laughed. Music after days of strain. Deal. We toasted with teacups, the sea outside black and gleaming under a peaceable moon. The tapestry lay safe behind its glass 3 streets away, the Selkie bride forever shedding her seal skin under woven stars. And here on Skeldara, 5 friends clicked needles in quiet harmony, content to weave our own small stories into the larger fabric of the island, one cosy stitch at a time.